Yeah. She hasn't barked all day. She decides to bark now.
She's barking at the basketball score. Tragic.
We ready, Shelby?
Yes.
Welcome, everyone, to the Caperd Corps Zoom presentations. My name is Patty Supay, and I am this year's Caperd president. I hope that you're enjoying these valuable presentations hosted by Caperd. We began this series in the summer, and we'll continue through January as we prepare for an exciting annual conference, March 11th through the 13th of 2021. It will be a virtual conference this year with many exciting speakers and presenters. Be on the lookout for registration information coming soon. We need to remind you that these course sessions are being offered for free. Creation of these series and much other behind the scenes work is done every day by dedicated volunteers, such as those that are here today helping with the tech side of this presentation. Thank you so much tonight for our Caperd volunteer, Shelby Lozano. Remember this work and advocating for our jobs, the return of minutes, and PFT testing in California schools, as well as quality instructions, relies on your membership. Our jobs depend on it. Our today's course session will be hosting a discussion board with NEA and CTA board member Mel House. Recently, Caperd put out a survey to California teachers to find out how programs and jobs are affected by the pandemic. We received almost 500 responses. It was clear through these responses that California teachers wanted support, resources, and an opportunity to have some questions answered. We contacted longtime Caperd member and physical educator Mel House to do just that. Mel will be sharing with you CTA resources and going over the ins and outs of working with your school, district administrators, and your local CTA to ensure that your program is recognized and that health and physical education remains a valuable subject in every child's school day. Here is just a little short info about Mel. As the CTA and EA coordinating director, Mel has statewide responsibilities on the CTA board, representing the numerous California educators serving on the National Education Association board. Mel represents the Los Angeles area on the NEA board as well. Mel has 22 years of overall teaching experience and is currently an elementary physical educator in the Los Angeles Unified School District's physical education itinerant program. Mel serves the local union, United Teachers Los Angeles, in many capacities, including as a site rep chair of the UTLA Inner City Committee and as an area director for 6 years. In 2005, Mel was awarded the NEA Foundation Award for Teaching Excellence and was chosen as the NEA Foundation Global Education Fellow, completing a field study in Peru. Mel was an education consortium of Central Los Angeles honoree in 2009. Most recently, Mel was accepted into and completed the Leadership Organizing and Action Leading Change course through the Howard Kennedy School of Executive Education. And now we are excited to present to you CTA Representative Mel House.
Thank you for that warm welcome, Patty. It's good to be back home in a Caperd meeting. Let me tell you that. I've had my share of those in my time as a PE teacher. So yeah, Patty pretty much covered it all. On the books, I'm still a PE teacher, but I am full-time release now, working for the union. I represent the entire state of California, basically coordinating union work between the state level union and the national level union. However, as I happen to be a PE teacher, when things come up with PE issues, then I am definitely a PE voice on the board of directors of the California Teachers Association. At which I'm kind of going to just jump right in, right? We're talking about COVID, we're talking about PE issues that are going on during COVID, but I do want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for being here tonight. I know it's a school night, it's a busy, just a busy day. It's 5 o'clock. I'm sure some of you have an adult beverage poured, and Michigan State is playing Duke right now. So with all that going on, the fact that you prioritized this event, I thank you for that. I'd like to just get right in and say that I reviewed a lot of the answers that you all gave to the open-ended questions on the survey that Patty was talking about. And basically, with any work-related issues, you've got three different levels of problems. You've got things that are at your site level, you've got things that are at your district level, and you've got things that are going on at the state level. And how you go about attacking those issues is different. Um, I'm going to go back to gallery view myself. And if you all can help me out here and just indulge me a little bit to turn your cameras on. So if I ask for a show of hands, you can actually do a show of hands physically, or just put your hand up. How many of you right now know who your site rep is, your union site rep at your school building? All right, that is the great majority of you. Sweet. So you've already got one good contact out of the way. But here's the interesting question where it starts to change. How many of you know who your California Teachers Association director is? All right. Jennifer Mettler, you get 10,000 points, which in this game don't mean a thing. All right. So there's a huge gap in between your building site and California Teachers Association, right? So you've got basically school site issues that a lot of people think that, hey, I'm going to treat my union like car insurance, and I'm not going to call the union until I have a problem. And the union's going to swoop in with a cape and a magic wand and choose somebody out, open up a can of whoop ass, leave, and things are going to be fine, right? Unfortunately, that's not how the world works. The union is more like a gym membership, and you pay your dues. And if you don't roll into the gym and start bench pressing, then you're not going to get much out of your union. So, on other hands, how many of you in your local union have a PE committee? All right, Desiree, you get the 10,000 points in this round. They don't mean anything, but you got them. How many of you have a district that has something like a PE task force or a PE focus team or a PE leadership team? All right, cool. So 4 of you have got that on the district end, but you don't have that on the union end. Now, I've dropped a few bombs already so far. Is there anybody as of yet that has something that you want to bounce into the room, or a question or clarification so far?
I'm curious as to the size of these districts that are affording for some kind of leadership team for PE.
The school district itself?
Yeah, like how many students are in their population, and where does the funding come from? Is this an anomaly because I'm in a very small community, or is this something that we should be lobbying for at my school?
Well, somebody who raised their hand that says you have some sort of PE leadership or task force at your district level, do you want to just unmute yourself and shout out, how big is your district?
We have in my district, we have six high schools, we have 6 middle schools, and then I can't even tell you right now off the top of my head how many elementary schools. So it's a very large district, very large.
Kevin, I have to smile when you say that, because that's I'm from
Well,
LAUSD.
compared to, I guess compared to
900.
where I'm at. Compared to where I'm at.
900 schools in my district. Wendy, go for it.
I'm in Torrance Unified, which is, I don't know, I think there's 4 regular high schools and 1 alternative high school, or maybe 2. Not sure how many. I think there might be 17 elementaries, not sure how many middle schools, 7, 8, something like that. But our recent addition at our site, and I teach at a middle school, for the vice principal, assistant principal, he was a former PE teacher, and so he has passion for PE still, and he is spearheading a task force to get everybody to standardize PE more, and before COVID, he wanted to get intramural middle school sports going and things like that.
Well, that's good. You've got a friendly boss. But in the union world, generally speaking, the boss is not your friend, right? So it's you can have a friendly relationship with your boss, but when it comes down to your collectively bargained contract, the boss is not your friend in terms of your contract, even though you can have friendly relationships, right? So you have to ask yourself what's more beneficial, to have a PE group that is under the auspices of the boss, or a PE group that is under the auspices of the members themselves. So to go back to that original question of who pays for it, when I was on ours in LAUSD, it was not it was not during school time. It was after school. We met at the district building. For most of them, I think maybe one of those meetings maybe had release time to go, and that was paid for by the district. But once the budget starts to slip, those are all the groups and meetings that just go away. But if your focus group, your PE group, is through your union, unless your membership votes to dissolve it, is always going to be there, right? Mm-hmm. And if you've got a small district, let's say you only have 3 PE teachers in your whole district, because maybe you're a secondary only school district, right? Well, especially in the times of COVID, who has the same issues going on as you right now? I'll bet if you talk to the music teachers in your schools and the art teachers in your schools, the problems that you have are exceedingly similar. So maybe you start a committee that's PE, art, and music teachers. Maybe that ups your group a little bit, right? And the reason I say this is because when it comes time to make decisions about your contract and your working conditions, nobody knows to bargain those things or talk about them unless you are bringing them up. How many of you know the name of your local assembly member in California? Your assembly member, the name of that person. And how many of you know the name of your Congress member? And how many of you have ever gotten a personal phone call from an assembly member or a Congress member just to ask how things are? Right? So it's the same thing with your union. The local union president isn't going to give you a phone call and say, "Hey, how's PE going?" If there are problems in PE, then your union needs to know about it. You need to call your local union leader, your local president, and say, "Hey, look, this is going on at my school site." How many of you know the procedure to follow if you have to file a grievance? Okay, hands are up a little more in that one, right? So you could, and again, I'm not, there's no huge point total at the end, but hopefully this illustrates for you all one of the issues that PE teachers have had for decades is the fact that as a group, we do not harness and understand our own power. That there are more of us than there are of them per se, but unless you actually leave the locker room office from time to time, nobody's ever going to feel your pain. In Los Angeles Unified, when I first started there, I started attending PE committee meetings through United Teachers Los Angeles. Now, granted, we've got 30,000 people, But out of 30,000 members, we have about 6,000 PE teachers, and about 7 would show up to a PE committee meeting. But those 7 people sure cranked some stuff out. But honestly, it took us over a decade to get on the list of things to bargain in the contract, right? The contract that you have between the school district and your union equals your working conditions. And class size is usually a huge one for us. That's not something that you call the governor and say, I've got 75 kids in my second period class, do something. That's not the governor's deal. That's your school district's deal in the bargaining with your union, right? So unless you have PE teachers saying, hey, we need to bargain class size, nobody's ever just going to say, hey, let's just put PE on the menu this year to bargain, right? So you've got to be able to communicate the issues that you have in terms of your own working conditions. And in COVID, those issues are huge. And CTA, our board normally meets once a month. When COVID started, the CTA board now meets once a week, because we are in a very dynamic, changing universe with COVID. We've got the colors now, school districts that were red, and now they had to invent a new color called purple and all this. And are we synchronous? Are we asynchronous? Are we in school? Are we virtual? What the heck is going on? Well, guess what? Every single district had to sit down and bargain what COVID learning would look like, right? How many of you were part of that bargaining process at all? Hey, again, 10,000 more points for Jennifer, right on. How many of you are aware that physical education was even bargained at all for your COVID working conditions? Was PE even on the list at all for your bargained COVID working conditions? That's 2 or 3 more hands. Okay, so again, just illustrating the collective issue, right? And so again, a lot of the thing that people least like to hear is CTA doesn't have a magic wand, right? However, what I can tell you a little bit here and that we can follow up on is, how do you make things happen? How do you form a committee? How do you get onto your leadership? How do you communicate your issues up the chain? Because you have every right to communicate your issues up the chain without retribution or fear of retribution, because all of you, I don't know that there are any districts in public school districts in California that don't belong to a union. You would only be in that condition if you were in a private school. So, Patty, before I roll on, are there any questions I need to hit?
Not that I'm aware of yet.
All right, cool. I don't know, a lot of silence in the room, right? Well, it's a lot of heavy stuff. Some of it, but also, again, we've got to decide as a group how we're going to move forward. And I am going to attempt here. So again, just, there are local decisions like your workload and your schedule, and it's solved by your department or your administrators. Okay, you've got class size or placement. That's solved by your school board and collective bargaining. I saw on your open-ended questions that there were some people that said, my whole district, they wiped out PE. Like, we're all teaching 3rd grade now because of COVID, and now there's just no PE anymore. Well, somewhere in your contract, it says that, in times of emergency or crisis, that your basic job duties can be changed. That can only be solved through your contract unless your administrator is acting illegally, in which case you need to file a grievance. But again, if you teach PE and now your admin says, go teach 4th grade because COVID, you can't call the governor and say, Newsom, fix this, because Newsom has no purview over that. Right? And then you've got state decisions like graduation requirements, testing, and reporting. And that's solved either by legislation or, in times of crisis, the governor saying, all right, well, we're going to suspend the PE minutes right now, which as a PE teacher in CTA who happens to be on the board, I've spoken to our GR department, governmental relations, and said, the next time you talk to the governor, you need to tell him that put the minutes back. It's not the minutes that are the issue. And it got shot back to me, well, you know, they're 200 minutes or 400 minutes, and some school districts aren't even doing 400 minutes of synchronous instruction. So if we left it there, then that means the kids would do nothing but PE all day because PE is the only thing in ed code that has minutes. And I'm like, okay, well, then make a compromise. Put the minutes back, but don't make the districts that have to report their minutes, don't do the reporting anymore. But the unintended consequences of getting rid of the minutes are districts who are now interpreting that as a program waiver and not a minute waiver, right? So CTA is aware of the unintended consequences. Those unintended consequences are being communicated to the governor, but guess what? They're only being communicated directly to the governor because CTA happens to have a PE teacher on their board. So what do we do about that? If I look over my shoulder, who's waiting in the wings? There aren't many PE teachers there waiting to jump into this kind of work. We've got to get out of the locker room and into the union hall. There's no other way to make anything happen, right? No other way to make anything happen. The largest decision-making body of the California Teachers Association is what's called State Council. The State Council of Education. There are 700 members in that body. Guess how many PE teachers sit on that 700 member decision-making body? Show me with your hands. Might take one, might take two. How many PE teachers do you think sit on that body? Dos. And I'm one of them. And the second guy is retiring next year. Okay? So, you need to learn about life in your union outside of your building. Learn about state council. Learn about when your next level union outside of your building, the next level up from your local, belongs to a service center. When is that next meeting? It's virtual. Find out and go. Doesn't cost you anything but time to go to a virtual meeting. But again, just hearkening back before I jump ahead, think about the issue that you're facing with PE in your workday, and is it a local decision, a district decision, or a state decision? Because the only people that can fix the local decisions are basically you, and you've got to know how to work the system. You've got a contract. When you violate the contract, you get written up. When your employer violates the contract, they get grieved, right? And depending on how the grievance goes, it might need to go to an appeal, but eventually a labor lawyer is going to look at it and rule. But again, that's the process you go through, not calling up the governor or not calling up CTA per se at that point to say, hey, I've got 72 kids in my class and I'm only supposed to have 60. You can't call Newsom on that one. So here's a quick organization check. I've asked you some of these with a show of hands, but again, these are all avenues to be able to harness your power and use it as a group. Does your school district have a PE leadership team? Does your local union have a PE committee? Do you have a vehicle in place to get PE teachers into your union leadership? Do you know who your site rep is? If you're not getting assistance from your site rep, do you know who to contact next? Do you know who your CTA board member is? Have you ever visited cta.org? Do you know when union meetings are, both site meetings and local meetings? And has PE been a part of your contract bargaining process? a lot of you can answer no or hell no to a lot of these questions. And again, just this simple checklist is a really, really, really good place to start. Find one of those that interests you and work on it. It's not that much digging to find out when your next local union meeting is, and bringing a motion forth to say, hey, I want to start a PE committee in this union, right? So you've got in CTA, here's the general chain of command when you don't know where to go next. You all are members. You've got a site rep. Your union has a local board. You've got local officers. And then after the local level, you've got a CTA director, a CTA board of directors, and CTA officers. But your dues dollars are also going to staff. You've got primary contact staff that works with your local officers. You've got regional managers that work with your CTA director. And these are the folks that if you have issues that your local leadership can't solve, then you've got union staff to help you, especially if you need to go and write a grievance because your contract is not being followed, right? And I know if you don't live in the union world, I realize this is a lot of stuff to throw out there, but I'm not here just to dump info and roll. I'm going to stop my share and I want to pause right there. If anybody wants to drop anything in the room, either a question or just bouncing back on what I've said, or just, general chit chat.
Mel, I know that in reading this survey, there were teachers that weren't sent down to teach third grade or a different grade, but some of them were sent to become a supervisor of students or help with reading in a classroom. And so they're not really teaching. Those were some frustrations that I saw that teachers had, that they were being dealt with like they were just an aide.
Right. And again, that's not a structural problem that you could just call the superintendent or the governor and say, fix this. You need to take a look at your actual contract that you bargained, because every district has a different one. There might be an actual line item in your contract that says in times of crisis that your job description that you signed for, right? Because normally it is a general practice that you sign a line, a matrix line in May of what you're going to be teaching the next year. And administration is not allowed to mess with that unless you have a drop in enrollment and people get laid off. However, you need to look at your contract, because your contract might actually say in times of crisis, an administration can use this famous line called other duties as assigned. And if you've got that in your contract, then unfortunately your administrator is well within their rights to turn you from a PE teacher into a reading assistant, because that falls under other duties as assigned, right? So if that line is not in your contract, however, that means your administrator is now violating your contract, and that's grievable. So how do you know? Well, guess what? Your union leaders and your union staff know the contract backward and forward. It would also behoove you to know where to find your contract. And where to find the most important chapter in your contract is called hours, duties, and work year. For the contract between Los Angeles Unified and United Teachers Los Angeles is literally this thick, right? But if you take it down to the most important 3 chapters, the most important chapter out of those 3 is hours, duties, and work year. And I tell you what, the average rank and file member in UTLA knows those 8 pages backward and forward. So again, there's nobody with the magic wand who can swoop down and say, hey, this sucks, fix it, change it. If it's in your contract, it can't be.
Mel, can you also... Okay, go ahead.
So for years now, our district has had us over contract numbers. We don't have class size caps at all, but like we have a goal of like 252 student contacts per day. And we've been at like 306 or plus. And the district keeps saying, we'll address it next year, we'll address it next year. And the union just keeps going along with that narrative. What do we do?
Good question. Well, first of all, you need to inquire. You need to hold your leadership accountable to your union and say, well, why are you just going along with that, right? You need to find out how often your negotiations are open. For instance, in Los Angeles, our negotiations open every 3 years, and each side gets to choose 3 items to put on the table. And then every, longer period, like 8 or 9 years or so, the entire contract is up, right? But, every other year, it's the district gets to choose 3 things, the union gets to choose 3 things, and those 6 things get negotiated back and forth. So is it that the union is just going along with it, or is the union trading that to keep something else that's more important, or what they see is more important? So who's on your bargaining team, right? Who's doing that bargaining for you? Do you have term limits to your union leadership? Is it somebody who's like on the verge of retirement, who's been the president of your union for the past 20 years, right? So these are all things that you should get to know and hold your leaders accountable. And if your leaders are just, skating through the entire negotiating process, then it's time to put new people in there.
What is that process? Because we have a fair amount of people just straight up leaving our union, to the point where we're I think we have like 126 teachers left in our actual union. It's kind of disheartening. And I know we're a small school district, but where does that process even begin?
It starts with one conversation. It starts with you calling a colleague and saying, are you happy with what's going on? Are you interested in changing it? At some point, there's got to be a notification for a call for elections, right? Nominations for office. At some point, the election process has to be communicated to you, right? So it starts with one conversation. Are you happy? No. Are you willing to change it? Great. Now you've got a team of 2. You set yourself a goal. By next week, each of you is going to bring one more friend to the conversation. Now you've got a team of 4. Great. Now between the 4 of you, you rock, paper, scissors for who you're going to put up to elect in the next election. And then each one of you brings another friend to the meeting. So now you've got 8 people. And if you've only got 125 people in your union, you only need those 8 people to each go find 2 more friends. And now you've just won an election. It starts with one conversation. You've got to familiarize yourself with the process and educate yourself about how those leadership people get there. And then you've got to find PE people to become those leadership people.
Well, what if you don't want to become the leadership person?
Well, then I got nothing. If there are no PE people ready to step up, I can't help you.
Yeah, I'm only a 3rd-year teacher, so there's no way that I would be able to hold a candle of respect towards any of that. So that's
Well, also too, I mean, it is in your contract that union activity is to be done without retribution, and there's a huge fear of being retaliated against. Well, guess what? That is not only against your contract, but that's against labor law. Again, there are more of you than you are of them, and even if your administrator is friendly, your administrator is not your friend. And if there is retaliation and retribution because of union activity, that is actually breaking labor law, and that's an easy grievance. The problem is you've got to stand together, right? Because if you're not standing together, then you can just get picked off one by one very, very, very easily. You've got to understand the power of your membership. And it's sad to me that people are leaving the union because of all the legal protections that you have and all the benefits that you have. If you're just out there as a lone solo agent, then you lose a heck of a lot of protection.
I have one other comment as well.
Sure.
as well as union. I mean, I was fortunate when I taught that we had our VP was a PE person, our VP in our union. So he was very, very strong. But in addition to that, I think it's really important that you you get some kind of leadership role within your district. If you don't have a PE committee, you need to create one. I just did that through the LCAP. I made sure that I forced myself into putting funding in the LCAP for physical education. We had a committee and we'd had every school send someone, and that made a huge difference because we were power once we created that committee. And it did take 4 or 5 years to make that committee strong, but they listened to us, and every year that money was put back into LCAP once it was established in there and once somebody stepped up to the plate. And I think that's what it takes, is somebody just has to step up and take that seat and say, I care. And you're going to get people to join with you. And if you really want to make a difference in quality physical education in your district, and then the union also looks at you and realizes that you are powerful because you've got a group, and that makes a difference too. So it's not just the union. I think it's a combination of working with your union and also working with your school board, working with your administrators at the district level.
And it's a long game. It's not a sprint. It's definitely a marathon. And basically, if you feel like you know zero about union type language, it doesn't matter. Everybody has to start somewhere. When I first moved from Michigan to California, I was only at my school about 3 years before I became the site rep. And let me tell you, the first time I had to go and meet with the principal, I pretty much had to change my chonies after that meeting. However, when I walked into that meeting, I had my little notebook that said, United Teachers Los Angeles on it, carried it under my arm and carried the contract under the other arm. I put a bunch of Post-it notes in the contract. They didn't mean crap, but my principal didn't know that. He knows that I rolled into the meeting with a UTLA notebook and the contract under my arm and sat down for that meeting, right? So it's all about perception, and it's all about delivery, and it's all about willing to go and step into that meeting in the first place. So then you develop a working relationship, right? Again, you might have a friendly administrator, but the boss is never your friend. So you've got to have somebody who stands up and speaks up, and when they look over their shoulder, they've got to know that the whole entire group is right there, because it sucks when you're that person and you look over your shoulder and nobody's there, right? So if you stand alone, then your job is going to be a lot harder. Anything else? And again, I'm not here to just drop this on you and leave. I am more than willing, if you are interested at all in having a deeper conversation about this, then I am going to put my email. Let me see. I'll put my email in the chat, and here's what I'm willing to do. If you want to set up a WebEx meeting with PE people just in your district, and you want to develop a strategy plan and an action plan, I will set up that meeting for you and we'll talk. If Capert itself wants to develop something like a task force or a group for a long-term plan of how to get more PE teachers involved in CTA, let's handle it. Let's schedule a meeting. Let's talk about it, right? It's a long-term goal. This is not a sprint. If you just want to know how to start a PE committee in your union, email me. We can handle that. We'll set up a meeting. We'll talk. We'll develop a strategy. We'll develop a game plan. If you want to know what is your next level, if you feel like your contract is not being followed in terms of, now I've got reading aid duty, then we'll have a meeting. We'll actually look up your contract. I'll help you go through it, and then I'll help you figure out who to talk to, right? I can't do much with your district. You got to figure out who your local union leaders are. And if you aren't getting feedback from them, if you feel like you aren't getting serviced by them, then who do you talk to next? Because there's always somebody else to talk to, right? If your local president is just not a PE person and they don't have the time to even look at their watch to tell you what time it is, well, guess what? There's always somebody else you can call, right? You've got a local union, a state level union, and a national union. They're all pumping out a lot of COVID related stuff, a lot of COVID related resources, and all kinds of things. Let me just, again, here's some homework, general homework for you. If you've never been here, cta.org. Right, there's a little question button down here. It's in the bottom right of your screen. Usually that's where everybody's bank of faces are. But there's this little chat button or a question button, and frequently asked questions or leadership. Well, guess what? Who's my CTA board member is right there. Where can I learn about CTA leadership? How do I run for state council? Those are all on the FAQ right there on front page of cta.org. Right? Again, in a 700 member decision-making body of California Teachers Association, there are currently 2 PE teachers on it. And I'm one. My goal is that when I leave in a year and a half, that there will be more than 2 people and 1 retiree in that group. Right? Getting involved, events and training. Guess what you have an opportunity to do? You've got, there we go. You've got opportunities as leaders to participate on a different level, right? Coming up this weekend, LGBTQ Issues Conference, Home Edition. It's virtual. You can still sign up. New Educator Weekend. Are you or anybody in your department a new educator? Amazing conference for new educators. Guess what these members are thirsty for? They're thirsty for PE stuff. So learn how to submit a proposal. Do you have an awesome workshop that's geared toward, say, elementary classroom teachers who are in charge of teaching PE? Do you have just awesome PE stuff that you can do on a rainy day? You would probably be the world's biggest rock star at New Educator Weekend if you put on a workshop like that, right? So we're coming up on conference season in CTA right now. It usually runs from December through March. There's New Educator Conference. There's Good Teaching Conference. The last person I can recall actually submitting a proposal to the Good Teaching Conference was Darren Everett. And that was, that's kind of a blast from the past, old school name, right? So the Good Teaching Conference, again, thirsty for PE stuff. Right? This is your state level union. Go put yourself out there. That's a way to get involved. That's a way to get your name out there. So when you decide you also want to take that next step and think about state council, people know who you are. There's got to be cross-mogination, right? PE, you've got to get out of the locker room and you've got to go out into the world. Because again, like I said, how many of you have ever gotten a phone call from your state assembly member or your congressional member just to say, hey, what's up? They don't know what to talk about or how to argue on the legislative floor until a PE teacher calls them up and says, yo, what's up with this cheerleading PE stuff credit? What's up with this rodeo stuff, right? So you've got to cross-moginate and you've got to get yourselves out there. Any other questions, comments? What else you want to drop in here?
I have a question.
Coach, go.
Yeah, my question is, to be on this board, these committees, is this something you have to be elected to, or can you just say, hey, I want to join, I want to be on this committee?
That depends on your local. When I talk about state council, the 700 member voting universe, that's an elected position. And depending on the size of your district, it's pretty competitive because there might be, say, 1 seat and 3 union locals have the chance to grab that 1 seat, right? Or in Los Angeles, we're so huge, we get 50 of those seats. So in Los Angeles, it's kind of like, hey, I want to join. And a lot of times there's a seat open for somebody who just wants to join. But if you're in a rural area, then it gets pretty competitive because there might be 2 or 3 school districts that only have access to 1 seat. Now, if you're talking about getting a PE committee together in your local, that's just a matter of what are the bylaws for your union and how do you start a group in your union. You've got to educate yourself on that process. Probably entails going to a meeting and saying, I move to start a PE caucus or a PE committee for the United Teachers of Tustin. And then that decision-making body debates that motion and decides whether or not you're going to have a PE committee.
Thank you.
Sure. But again, Coach, that also goes to access and knowledge. And you've got to educate yourself about the process and how does that work. A good start is just visiting cta.org and playing around in there and figuring out where the union meetings are that are bigger than your local.
While we have a little bit of a lull, I want to introduce Terry Drain. For those of you who don't know, she is our president-elect for Shape America, and she's come on today to join us. And Terry, you want to say a word?
Okay, thanks, Patty. This is gold. Mel, this is amazing information. Thank you so much for doing this. I had the opportunity, I retired from Pleasanton in 2019, but I started off getting involved in my union, first of all, just attending meetings. And I went from that to being a site rep to head rep to being a member of our bargaining team. And I am just nodding my head with everything that Mel is saying. My advice to you is get involved, get informed, and know your contract. And this is so, so important for advocacy and getting your program the respect and support you need to provide quality physical education. So I write down Mel's email address and take her up on her offer that this is like, you can't afford not to. This is golden information. So I just want to give my appreciation to Kayford and Mel for providing this webinar. And yeah, thank you so much. And I will step back now and go back to listening. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. And yeah, just again, the most important thing you can do is get out of the locker room. Literally get out of the locker room. Because nobody's going to come visit your locker room. Nothing's going to happen until you make it happen. Again, unless it has to do with legislation, and then it's all on us. The CTA board, like I said, I had a conversation with our head GR staff right before the Thanksgiving break because they had a meeting with Gavin Newsom, and I'm like, you've got to talk about this PE minute crap. You've got to put it on your agenda. You've got to, every time you see him, you've got to hit him with it. But again, it wouldn't be on their agenda necessarily, except for the fact that there happens to be a PE teacher on the CTA board right now. And that's the only way, unless there's PE happening at the local level, so that when those local presidents talk to their CTA board members, they're hearing about PE issues. Right? When I brought it up in the boardroom, I'm the one telling board members, hey, did you hear in such and such a school district? And Patty, that was the email where I said to you, these problems are great, but unless I know what district they're happening, I can't do anything. But I'm the one in a board meeting pointing over to, district D director saying, hey, bro, did you know that down in this school district, this stuff is happening with PE? He's like, no, local presidents haven't told me jack about that. Or, District K director, hey, I heard that, all the PE teachers are now teaching 4th grade in one of the locals in your district. Oh, really? That's the first I've heard about it. No local union president has told me about any PE problems. So, I'm letting the directors know that they need to check in about PE for a couple certain districts. But unless anybody knows there's a problem, then the wheels can't be put in motion to solve that problem. And you've got to identify the problem. Is it a local issue, a district issue, or a state issue? Because the bigger ones can only be solved through legislation. And that's where the big CTA comes in, right? State council decides on the policy that we write ourselves and adopt. CTA will not support or not support, either yay for this legislation or no on this legislation based on policy that we have. If there's a piece of legislation written and CTA looks in our policy book and our policy book doesn't handle it, then we don't take a position on legislation, or we write policy to align with how we feel about that legislation. So when charter schools first came out, right? The first pieces of legislation about charter schools, CTA didn't have a position on because we had zero policy about charter schools. So rank and file members, like all of us in this room that are part of state council, there are a bunch of different committees. There's curriculum and instruction committee. There's school safety committee. Guess what? Curriculum and instruction and school safety are both really great places for PE teachers to be in the room. There's career tech ed committee. There's retirement committee. And those committees, rank and file members actually sit down and write CTA policy. It was actual classroom teachers who wrote the CTA policy on charter schools, that then we say, all right, based on our policy, yes, we'll support this legislation against private charters, or we'll support this legislation about 30-minute lunch or whatever, right? So if you look in the CTA policy handbook, which is extra credit homework, and you put PE in the little search box, you'll probably find this much about PE in the policy handbook. You know why? Because there's 2 people in a 700-member body that know anything about PE, right? So why hasn't there been legislation about a state cap on class size? Well, nobody's written any lately. And even if they did, CTA doesn't really have any policy except that class sizes should be reasonable. And that's kind of an across the board thing, whether you're talking about math class, English class, or PE, right? Because nobody's in the room talking about it. How do we solve that problem? Get people in the room talking about it. Just another real world example. This is a little bit in the past, but how many of you remember a piece of legislation, the not too distant past, about giving PE credit to rodeo classes in rural school districts? Right? Well, the motion on the floor at CTA from our legislative staff and our legislative committee, they were going to support it. And it got to a debate on the floor. And I rolled up to the microphone and gave a very flowery speech about physical education and standards and age inappropriate activities and age appropriate curriculum, and how exercise was only one component of physical education. And thank God I learned how to give flowery speeches, because CTA changed their mind. But what would have happened if no PE teacher was on the floor to be able to take the mic to say that? Then CTA would have supported legislation to give PE credit to rodeo classes, right? And that's not to say that CTA is inherently anti-PE. It's just that rank and file members, based on their perceptions of PE, that's how they make their decision. So unless you've got real world PE teachers in the room talking to your own colleagues about what PE really is, then they're going to vote their conscience based on their experiences, which we all know back in the day were not always the best. So nothing's ever going to change unless we make it change, and we've got to realize that there are more of us than there are of them, and that by them I mean administrators and decision makers.
I do want to add that I have been in close contact with CTA President Toby Boyd, and he is extremely supportive of the work that we do and quick to respond, and has directly called me on the phone, which I'm very impressed that he is supporting what we do. And between him and work with Mel, I think we've got good advocates there for the work that we do. In addition to Capert has a legislative advocate that works hard on a lot of these issues. We are presently working on the PFT. We are also working on the minutes through our legislative advocate and with the CVE as well. So you've got Capert there behind you, but all the more help that we can get through CTA, the better.
Absolutely.
And to say, we've also got SHAPE.
There you go.
SHAPE's there for us all the time.
And that pretty much wraps up what I had to cover on my agenda with the last few minutes. If anybody else wants to throw anything in the room, and please scroll back on the chat and write down my email address. And to the extent that I can, I'll help you get started and help you get rolling.
I'll just jump in with one more thing. And as a response to the comment of the district where the teachers are quitting the union, that is the last thing you want to do. You have zero representation then. And that's exactly, there are anti-union movements in this country. That's exactly what they want to see happen. So belong to your union, start showing up to your meetings, just get involved, even if it's only at that level. But again, the worst thing you could possibly do is to give up your membership.
Amen.
Thank you, Terry. I also want to let you know that Mel is willing to put together another session with us in January. So please comment to Capert, to the website. Let us know through Capert if you'd like to see more of this, or maybe have her dive deeper into creating some solutions to what we can do. And we'll do that for you. We'll be glad to put that together.
Anybody else for the good of the order have any nuggets to drop in the room?
I was just going to say, Mel, I had an issue last year in my district with our athletic director and administration, and my sister who teaches also different subject. But I can't tell you enough about that as well. The same circumstance. I came in there with a notepad, walked in with a contract, walked in with the way that I was kind of treated by our athletic director at the time, who's no longer there. But it definitely shows a sense of knowing, your rights as an educator. When you come in more prepared and get them to understand that you also would like representation from your union rep. Since then, I've also I've been nominated for a union rep. I decided this year it wasn't the time for me to do it, just because of the different hats that I wear on our campus. And this is just kind of a wild time also. But I know how powerful it is as a PE educator, and the way that we have to be in our classroom. It's important for us to get out, and I'm glad you say that, to get out of the locker room, because I'm the department chair at my high school, and I encourage our teachers to get out of the classroom, go up to the other departments. I spend a lot of time up in the social science department and other departments on our campus, just to kind of get out there and have different conversations about what's going on in the other classrooms, because I think that is extremely powerful to know what they're going through as well, and kind of how they're dealing with whether it be different students or different circumstances. So definitely relate to that kind of situation that you're talking about, and knowing that contract and having it with you definitely made a difference in the way that it was perceived by administrators and how serious the situation really was. So I appreciate that sense of sharing that information.
Thank you for the real world example, Kevin. And yeah, there's nothing more powerful than walking into your administrator's office, pointing to your contract and quoting chapter and verse of what's being violated. If you can point out to the sentence of what's being violated, an administrator is going to clean up a lot faster than if you just roll in and say, I feel oppressed. This isn't right. It's like, well, you got to explain yourself. And if you can point to it, it's gonna fix the problem a whole lot faster. So thank you, Kevin. All right, Patty, I guess we're wrapping up.
Yeah, well, I just want to remind everybody that this session will be available for you on the Capert website. We have recorded this as well as on our YouTube channel. So you can go back and get all this information anytime you want on any of those channels. And also keep posted. We have some core sessions coming up in January as well. So keep your eyes open for things to come. And once again, everyone, let's give Mel a great big thank you for all that she's done. We appreciate it.
And thank you for having me, Patty. And we'll be in touch about that next sesh and how you want to focus